Tonight we're going to be speaking about Shabbat the Queen, Shabbat HaMalka. Why is Shabbat so special? What is Shabbat all about? There's a very big misconception in the secular world that the mitzvot, the commandments that we do, are for Hashem. Hashem needs them. Even though there is something similar mentioned in the Kabbalah, that Hashem needs the mitzvot, He doesn't really need them. Hashem does not need anything. But mitzvot need to be fulfilled. There is a reason for them. But the real purpose of the mitzvot is not for Hashem, it's for us. Those who feel that they are fulfilling His commandment, God's commandment, because He asks of us to fulfill it, eventually feel that the commandments are a burden. He asks us, He requires this, He demands that. These kind of ideas lead one, or can lead one, to feel that something is a burden if it's too difficult. And there are some mitzvot that are not easy. But that is a misconception. Because in reality it is for our benefit, it is for our good. And if one would be convinced of that, then nothing is a burden. If somebody were to give you 100 kilo of gold, would you say it's too heavy for you to carry? I'm sure you'd gladly take and figure out a way to carry it. So attitude is very important. The mitzvot are not a burden. They're a tremendous source of blessing for us, as we will see. But Shabbat is an excellent example for those who are secular, who are as yet not observant of Shabbat. And they many times choose this as an example of how it is difficult for them to be Jewish. It is difficult for them to observe the mitzvot. Shabbat is difficult. It is a burden. They'd love to have fun. They'd love to be occupied doing all sorts of other things, but not observing the Shabbat. If only they would taste what Shabbat really is, then they would see that it's not a burden. It's not difficult at all. On the contrary, Shabbat is liberating and it's uplifting. And if anything, it makes life easier, not more difficult, as we will see. So what is Shabbat? Shabbat is the 7th day of the week. It happens to be a very different day. And it's also the last day of the week. And all of these are important. Let's begin with the number 7. 7 in Jewish tradition is holy. It's unique. Because the world as we know it, the Olam Hazeh, comprises of 6 points. And for those of you who were paying attention in Sukkot, the Na'anuim, the movement of the Lulav, was towards all the 6 corners of the world. North, south, east, west, up and down. The Magen David has 6 points. 6 is therefore representative of Olam Hazeh. Number 7, Ze'al Tiv'i. Number 7 is out of this world. It's not limited by the dimensions of this world. It's supernatural. It's holy. Holy meaning it's higher. It is above this world. And number 8 is representative of Olam Haba. So therefore, Shabbat in its most simplistic sense is represented by the number 7 because it has nothing to do with Olam Hazeh. It's something completely different. It's therefore a different type of day. What's so different about Shabbat? What makes it so unique? Why is it not like the rest of this world? For those of you who've read the very first chapters in Bereshit, you may remember the incident with Adam and Chava. As a result of them not obeying the will of Hashem, they were cursed. One of the curses, the curse that man received, was Bezeat apecha tochal lechem. You will have to work hard to earn a living. You will sweat. And all of us know that. And that it's not easy to make a living. And That's just the way things are going to be until Mashiach comes. That's the way things have always been. But Hashem says, even though the 6 days were cursed, even though that's the way life will be for all of humanity, you will have to work hard to put bread on the table, I will leave one day of the week with the original blueprint that I had in mind for this world. The original blueprint of no work, of menucha, of rest, no physical labor. And what would you do if you had no physical labor? You would focus on something more important. And that's the tachlit, the purpose of life. When people work, they're not focusing on the purpose of life. They want to know how to earn a living, how to put bread on the table, how to pay the bills. That's what they're focused most of the time. And many people, of course, are frustrated if they can't make ends meet. If they're out of a job, then they're really depressed because they're focused on the most immediate goal. But that's not the true goal of life. The true tachlit is only found in Shabbat, as I'll explain later on. So this one day of the week, called Shabbat, is blessed. There is no curse. But when we say blessed, we mean two things. It says, Vayvarecheu, Vaykadsheu. Kadosh Baruch Hu blessed this day, and He sanctified it. Sanctifying something means to elevate it. It is not the same. Blessing it means that Kadosh Baruch Hu is endowing it with something else. A blessing means that there is something there that is not elsewhere. The seventh day has something that Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday do not have. So what does Shabbat have? What is the beracha of Shabbat that does not exist in the rest of the week? It says elsewhere in the Torah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu rested on Shabbat. Shabbat vayin nafash. You may recall. You said in the Kiddush. What's vayin nafash? The simple meaning of vayin nafash is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu rested. Does HaKadosh Baruch Hu need to rest? HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need to rest. But the simple meaning is that He abstained from creating. Creation occurred for 6 days. Came along the seventh day. HaKadosh Baruch Hu abstains from creating. From creating what? The root of the word vayin nafash is nefesh. There's no more nefashot. There's no more creation of beings. And in the same way HaKadosh Baruch Hu abstained from creating, when He gave us the commandment of Shabbat, He asks us also not to create. Not that we create like HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates. God creates yesh mi'ayin, something from nothing. Man is capable of creating when he has the raw materials. You can call it a yetzirah, maybe not a true beriyah. And that is why all the melachot on Shabbat that are forbidden have something to do with a yetzirah. We are forming something, we are creating something. It is not the physical hard work that's a problem, because you can carry this heavy table across the room and not be doing anything against the spirit of Shabbat. But if you carry a handkerchief outside, if there's no eruv, that would be a melacha. If you were to write your name on a piece of paper, that would be a melacha. Right? If you were to do certain things that even though they're not difficult, they may be melachot. They are forbidden in Shabbat because they have something to do with yetzirah, something creative, something that does not fit. It's not compatible with the spirit of Shabbat. Shabbat is not olam hazeh, has nothing to do with olam hazeh. Therefore, there can't be anything that would make us forget about Shabbat. And there are certain melachot that if we do them, they would tend to take away the spirit of Shabbat. They go against the whole idea of Shabbat, what Shabbat represents. In order for us to really experience Shabbat, to really feel what Hashem wants us to feel on that day, to really get a feel for the original blueprint that Hashem had in mind, then we have to let go of certain things. And even certain things that are not forbidden by the Torah, like reading newspapers, doesn't say anywhere that that's forbidden, but it goes against the spirit of Shabbat. Imagine looking at the stock exchange, especially if it went down on Shabbat. It's very depressing, right? You don't want to be depressed on Shabbat. You don't want to be depressed any day. But Shabbat, it would be going against the whole feel, the whole spirit of Shabbat. So vayin nafash, therefore, means to abstain, because Hashem abstained. In order for us to feel the Shabbat, we let go of certain things that we do during the rest of the week. But in the word vayin nafash, there's also some additional insinuations, additional remazim. Vayin nafash also means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us something extra. It's called a neshama yetera. An extra neshama. A whole week we have our soul. On Shabbat we have an additional soul. And it's through this additional soul that we are able to experience what many of us experience as Shabbat. Without that additional soul, we would not experience it. And I'll explain later on what it is that we experience. But that neshama yetera is part of the blessing. It is something extra that we have now that we don't have during the rest of the week, and it's through that neshama yetera that we can actually feel different. Vayin nafash also means that the nefesh that we all have, the physical nefesh, not the neshama, takes a moshav achori, takes the back seat. And for once a week, we allow the neshama, the spiritual soul, to express itself, something that it may not have been able to do successfully perhaps a whole week, because we were focused on the physical needs. And therefore the neshama, that has nothing to do with physical needs, is in the back seat. Well, Shabbat, they switch roles. They take turns. Vayin nafash, the nefesh gets out of the way. It rests. No more focus on the physical needs. No more thinking about the job. Vayin nafash allows the neshama to finally express itself and to begin to focus on what? Not on work, but on its true tachlit, on its true goal, on its purpose, on the meaning of life. Rabbis also tell us that the beracha of Shabbat also includes the parnasah for Shabbat. Because we don't work on Shabbat. So how are we going to earn money? Well, just like the man came down every day, but on Friday we got a double portion, HaKadosh Baruch Hu provides for us that on Friday or some other day we will have for Shabbat too. HaMelacha ne'esta me'elea. The work has been done and taken care of. Shabbat does not require us to work. It's a day of beracha, of blessing, meaning that it's been provided for. Now we will understand what the rabbis have said about Shabbat being a gift. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I have a matana tova, bebet gnazai. I have a very special gift in my treasure house that I want to give to the Jewish people, Moshe. Please go and let them know. These are the words of the Midrash. Matana is a gift. What does that mean? It's something that comes from someone else. It is not something that we can do on our own. We can acquire on our own. It has been given to us by Hashem. It's bebed gnazai, it's in my treasure house. What does that mean? It's something valuable. It's not just a day of rest. It's something beautiful, something very important, special. Umevakesh ani latet, and I want to give it to them. What does that mean? HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to give it to them because it's for their good. They're going to gain so much from it. Therefore, let them know how valuable this is. And this reminds me of a story of a rabbi who was very, very charitable. But one day he had no money to give this poor man who came begging at his door. But because he was so charitable, he went over to his wife's jewelry chest and pulled out an expensive ring and gave it to him. He didn't think too much about it, and the poor man was ecstatic. As soon as the wife noticed, as soon as she came in and noticed that her ring was missing, she started screaming and crying. And she went over to her husband. You know how much this is worth? This is worth $3,000 or whatever. So he immediately ran after the poor man, and the poor man thought that this guy changed his mind. So he started running faster. But the rabbi eventually caught up with him and says, no, I don't want the ring back. But please remember, don't sell it for $10. It's worth $3,000. Make sure you get your money's worth from this ring. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is letting us know Shabbat has a value. Don't belittle it. Don't just think that it's any ordinary day. He's therefore telling Moshe, let them know that this is coming from my treasure house. This is a very special gift. Tell them that this is not something ordinary. So they should know how to value it. Since this day is a blessed day and a holy day, the rabbis tell us that whoever observes it properly will be able to actually feel Echad Mishishim Olam Haba, 1/60th of what Olam Haba is all about. As I explained earlier, since Shabbat is to give us an idea of what the original blueprint was and what the world will be after Mashiach comes, whoever observes Shabbat properly can actually experience 1/60th of Olam Haba. That is why Shabbat is the last day of the week, because that is where we should be aiming for. We don't aim for Monday, we don't aim for Tuesday, we aim for Shabbat. Olam Hazeh also, we should be aiming for Olam Haba. This is a temporary world. The important world, what we should really be focused on is Olam Haba. We should be focused on Shabbat. And that is why Shabbat is at the end. It's the most important day of the week. And what do we experience on Shabbat? The food is tastier. Somehow. Try to make the same recipe on Monday, it won't taste the same. The Kabbalah says, Sheme'or panav shel ha'adam shoneh, that his countenance, the way he appears, looks completely different. There was one rabbi who everybody would swear was a foot taller on Shabbat. Somehow he just looked taller. And our tradition tells us that the more one prepares for Shabbat, the more one does for the kavod of Shabbat, the more he will feel, and the more Shabbat will reward him. The question is, why did Hashem give the Jewish people Shabbat and not the rest of the world? If this is something so precious, something so important, something so uplifting. There's an interesting midrash that says as follows. Shabbat complained, every day of the week has a bat zug, has a partner. Sunday and Monday are partners, Tuesday and Wednesday are partners, Thursday and Friday are partners. Shabbat is by itself. And Shabbat says, I have no partner. And Hashem says, don't worry, Am Israel, the Jewish nation, will be your partner. What's the meaning behind this midrash? Every day of the week has a partner, Shabbat has no partner. The meaning is as follows. Every day of the week has a partner because certain days of the week complement each other. In the creation, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created certain things every single day. And they need each other. In order for this world, this Olam Hazeh to function properly, all that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created has to be in place. So each day, or certain days, work together. Shabbat, however, has no partner because in Shabbat there is no work. It's a spiritual day. And therefore, who's going to be his partner? What is it for? Why did Hashem make this day? And Hashem says, Am Israel will be your partner. Because Am Israel has nothing to do with Olam Hazeh. They have a totally different job than the rest of the world, the rest of the nations. They have a spiritual job. And you're a spiritual day. So Shabbat will be the bat zug, the companion, the spouse, the soulmate, however you want to call it, of Shabbat. Shabbat, therefore, was given to the Jewish people. But what's interesting is that Shabbat was given to the Jewish people before Matan Torah, even before the Torah was given in Har Sinai. right after we left Egypt. Why? Because Shabbat also represents a Brit Nesu'in, a covenant between us and the Almighty. We're making a covenant. And when one observes Shabbat, he is testifying two things. One, Kisheshet Yamim Asa Hashem et Hashamayim v'et haaretz. He's testifying that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. And you know what? Ever since we've been testifying that, the whole world agrees with us, because for everybody, Saturday is Saturday. Unless, of course, you're in another time zone. But there's no disagreement about the days of the week. Am Yisrael has always been testifying from the very beginning. Shabbat has been Shabbat. Hashem created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. That is one testimony. What's the second testimony? You will find another portion of the Torah that says the reason why we keep Shabbat is to remember that Hashem took us out of Egypt. What does Shabbat have to do with taking us out of Egypt? Because in the same way that we testify that God created a world, which some philosophers always believed, we're also saying that God continues to supervise the world. Not like some believe, yes, He created, but He bailed out. He's no longer around. Otherwise, how do you explain all of this evil? Why are the righteous suffering and the wicked people appear to be getting away with it? Maybe He's not around anymore. Yes, He did create. No, God created the world, and He continues to supervise it. How do I know? Because He took us out of Egypt. He made all these miracles. He kept His promise, and He redeemed us. So He continues to oversee, continues to supervise the world as well. So these are the statements, powerful statements that we're making by having entered this covenant with Hashem, by giving this testimony every single week. For the Jew himself, when he observes the Shabbat, it's not only testimony, it actually strengthens his emunah. Because if he observes it properly, he can actually feel this is a very different kind of a day. His neshama is all of a sudden expressing itself. So for the Jew himself, it's not so much the testimony that he gives, it's the feeling, it's what he experiences that strengthens his emunah. Because he can actually feel the Shefa Eloki, the divine light, the blessing coming down on this day more than every other day, depending on how he observes, of course, the Shabbat. That is why Shabbat is called Shabbat HaMalka, Shabbat the Queen. Because Hashem is the Melech, Hashem is the King. And if we want to have a close relationship with the King, the best way to do so is through the Queen. And that is why it is through Shabbat the one shows how much he truly loves Hashem, how much he's excited to do the mitzvot. Rabbis tell us the Shabbat acts like a mirror. You can tell by how one observes Shabbat, depending on how he observes Shabbat, that is how he observes all the mitzvot. If he's excited about Shabbat, if he's observant of Shabbat, you can rest assured that he's probably careful as much as possible with all the mitzvot. If one is not careful with Shabbat, then he has no respect for the other mitzvot. Shabbat is a mirror. You can tell a lot on how much a person is careful with the mitzvot, how excited he is on how he keeps Shabbat. I speak about this in different lectures, but I think it's an important point here, just to illustrate this idea a little bit better on how Shabbat shows how connected we are with Hashem. Some psychologists say that in a husband and wife relationship, there are three components called CPI: commitment, passion, and intimacy. A lot of people are committed, and that is why they're not divorced. But there may not be that much passion between them. And even if there is some passion, maybe there's not that much intimacy. Intimacy means good communication, good friendship. There could be passion, but it's important that there should be a little bit of all three. Hopefully a lot of all three. But different relationships work differently. In the same way that there is commitment, passion, and intimacy between husband and wife, or between very close friends, it is also true in the mitzvot. Commitment, and instead of passion, let's use the word exhilaration, excitement, or enthusiasm. And instead of using intimacy, we'll use the word devotion. In other words, similar idea exists in our relationship with Hashem, in how we fulfill the mitzvot. Are we excited to do mitzvot, or is it a burden? Are we tired of it? Are we committed? Are we regular? And you can tell, you can see how people do the mitzvot. And you should be able to figure out how committed they are, just on observing their excitement or lack of excitement in fulfilling a mitzvah. So Shabbat is a tremendous mirror that mirrors the person's behavior with Hashem and his relationship with all the mitzvot. Now, what happens if a person does not observe Shabbat? We just said that Shabbat is a brit nesuin, it's a covenant with Hashem, that it shows our connection to Him. It demonstrates how strongly we feel about all the mitzvot. Can you imagine what happens if a person stops keeping Shabbat? To what is this compared to? The Chafetz Chaim used to give the mashal to one who goes down the street to his favorite hardware store. And he sees that the door is closed. What is he going to figure? The guy is on vacation. Comes back next week, still closed. Well, maybe on an extended vacation. Eventually he's going to come back. How does he know he's going to come back? Because he sees the sign, hardware store. He sees the tools. He sees that there's something still going on in the store. What happens if this guy comes back after 30 days and there's no more sign, hardware store? What's his conclusion going to be? The guy's out of business, he moved. Chafetz Chaim says when a Jew does not observe certain mitzvot, it could be that he's not, fully observant, but eventually he'll come back. He's like on a vacation. He's still Jewish. But what happens if a Jew takes off the sign? He takes off the sign. Shabbat is a sign. Ki ot hi beni ubenechem. Shabbat is a sign. If a Jew takes off the sign, then he's out of the business. It means he's divorcing himself completely. He doesn't want to have anything to do with it. That's the importance of Shabbat. It's a sign. It shows a lot about our relationship with Hashem. When people come back and do teshuvah, I always encourage them to begin slow and to take upon themselves something that they know they can keep. For men, tefillin. For women, lighting candles. There's other things too. But there's no doubt that as soon as they feel confident of themselves, they need to work on Shabbat more than any other mitzvah, immediately. Because Shabbat has tremendous powers to bring one out of the tum'ah, out of that impurity that he's sunk in for so long. Shabbat is uplifting. Shabbat will sanctify him. It will give him a totally different experience. It will make him bond with Hashem. And it will give him an opportunity to prove that he's sincere, that he's really devoted. So therefore Shabbat is the goal that every Baal Teshuvah, everyone wanting to become closer to Hashem, wanting to be more observant, needs to tackle. I don't always tell that to them in the first conversation I have because it's very difficult. It's a tremendous big commitment. It's not easy. They may have been working on Shabbat. They may have a job. It's not easy. But that's what everybody needs to aim for. Because once they have embarked on Shabbat, the Shabbat has such power that it will be able to uplift them and make them and help them in their future progress. That is why the rabbis tell us, Kol HaShomer Shabbat, whoever observes Shabbat, even if he used to be Oved Avodah Zarah, even if he was worshipping idols, in other words, he did the most terrible sins, Mochalim lo, they will forgive him. Because the koach of Shabbat is so great, the power of Shabbat, that it will bring him close. Same thing with the Torah. Whoever learns Torah, the light of the Torah is so powerful that even though he may have been misbehaving and doing bad things, the light of the Torah will bring him back. As the rabbis tell us in the Gemara, Hashem said, I wish they would have left me but not left my Torah. Because if they would not have left my Torah, if they would have continued, the Jewish people would have always have been continuing to study the Torah. The light of the Torah would have brought them back. It's one thing if a Jew lets go at one mitzvah, if he's lax in a particular area, but if he lets go of the Torah, he lets go of the Shabbat, he's losing his link, the most powerful link to Hashem. The Ramban has a beautiful mashal of why this covenant of once a week is so important. He says there were two friends who were very, very close, but they lived far apart. One lived in, Lancaster, and the other one lived in San Diego. And they were very, very close. And they said, what can we do? We want to see each other. Talking on the phone is not enough. So what did they make up? Once a week they meet. And they never miss. If there is true love, if there is a true bond between two people, between Am Yisrael and Hashem, you would look forward to this. You would want to have this yourself. So the Ramban says, those who observe Shabbat, that's basically what they're doing. They're meeting with Hashem once a week and they're not going to let go. For all the monies of the world, they won't let go of this. Whoever does not observe Shabbat, what is he compared to? There's another mashal, to a king who invited all his children. And he tells his children, I'm inviting you for a very special occasion. I want to make you very, very happy. I love you very much. So come and see me. I guarantee you'll be happy. Everybody came except for one son. When the father of the king asked that son, why didn't you come? The son answered, well, all you want to do is make me happy. I found other ways to make myself happy. I went to the theater, I went to the beach. That's the greatest chutzpah, wouldn't you agree? Father tells you he wants to make you happy and you're looking for other ways to make yourself happy. But that's what one does, or that's what one is saying when he's looking for other ways to have fun, to enjoy himself. Kadosh Baruch Hu has promised, this is a matana tova, it's a good gift. I guarantee you will be very happy. Just try it out. But why is it that many people, unfortunately, have a weakness with Shabbat? The greatest weakness of all, you know what it is? Because of parnasa. They don't have complete bitachon, complete reliance in Hashem. They really feel Saturday is my best day. And they can prove it. They'll show you all the customers that walk in. They don't realize that 2 months down the road, all the money that they made on Shabbat will be spent on attorneys or on root canals or on all these unanticipated expenses. That they forget because it's 2-3 months later. They don't tie it in. They don't see the connection. It didn't happen the next day on Sunday. See, had it happened on Sunday, maybe they would guess. But Hashem doesn't want to make it so obvious. But there's no beracha from Shabbat. Shabbat itself is a source of blessing. That there's no beracha from working on Shabbat. And that is why, because of this challenge, many people who came to this country at the turn of the century, when they had to work 6 days a week, if not they were fired, many of them worked on Shabbat. Those that gave up Shabbat, many of their kids or grandchildren are assimilated. Those that did not give in, did not work on Shabbat, Shabbat protected them, and many of them are still Jewish. They're still observant of the Shabbat. And we have a tradition, whoever is moser nefesh al mitzvah, whoever sacrifices and does not give up, works hard to preserve a mitzvah, that mitzvah will remain with him. Throughout history, all the mitzvot, like Shabbat and Milah, and circumcision, the Jews gave their life for it. They were not willing to give it up at any cost. Because they were not willing to give it up, they sacrificed their lives for it. Because of that, it remained with them. But those who give it up, then you see the effects on their children and grandchildren. But how do we convince these people that Shabbat is a source of blessing, that you will not lose money if you work on Shabbat? The Chafetz Chaim used to give a beautiful mashal. We believe that the parnasa, the livelihood of everyone, has already been preordained. It's already determined either through the mazal or on Rosh Hashanah. What happens if somebody works on Shabbat? What does he compare to? To somebody who takes a barrel of wine and says, well, I only have one faucet here, and there's 20 gallons here. I'm going to open up a faucet on the other side. I'll have 2 faucets, and I'll get more. You're not going to get more. There's only so much in this barrel. What's going to happen? Because you're going to open up a faucet on the other side, you're going to get the same amount, it's going to be faster. So you're going to make all this money on Shabbat, and you're going to make less money on Tuesday or Wednesday. Because there's only so much money in the chavit, in the barrel. There's only so much that Kadosh Baruch Hu preordained for you. You can't get more than what's in the barrel. So it's a lack of bitachon, a lack of education, ignorance, whatever you want to call it. The reality is, Shabbat is a source of blessing, and anybody who works on Shabbat, on the contrary, he's taking away from the blessing. Kadosh Baruch Hu would not give us something that would harm us. Shabbat doesn't harm. On the contrary, it's a tremendous source of blessing. Erev Shabbat, that is exactly what we say. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelecha ki hi mekor haberacha. Let's go and receive Shabbat because she's the source of blessing. What do we mean by that? I think the best way to explain this point of how Shabbat is really a source of blessing, or as the Zohar says, how Shabbat bestows blessing on the following week. The best way perhaps is through stories. There was a fascinating story that just happened, actually it happened in the 80s, in Mexico City. There was a Jew, he's still there, who was just becoming a Baal Teshuvah. And as I said earlier, one of the first challenges he had to deal with was Shabbat. And it wasn't easy to leave early, to come home early, to not do certain things on Shabbat. And he had major deals, and sometimes his customers, his clients wanted to meet with him on Shabbat. But he tried. But one Friday it was very, very tempting. He was working on a very, very important deal. He had this big building that he wanted to sell and he had to get rid of. And he was having a hard time selling it. And finally, these clients from America, I think they were willing to negotiate with him. But negotiations don't happen so quickly. And it was schlepping, it was taking time. And this is Friday, and Friday afternoon. Shabbat is getting close. And he says to his prospective clients, listen, I'm sorry, but I need to go home. Listen, they tell him, if you don't sign right now, if we don't finish it right now, forget the deal. And this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If he doesn't make the deal right now, he's going to have a tremendous loss. What is he supposed to do? And he says, no way, I'm not giving up on my Shabbat. No deal, no deal. Decide whatever you want. If you're still around on Sunday, fine. If not, okay. And he went. He didn't give in. He lost the deal. About 6 months later, I think, there was a big earthquake in Mexico City that some of you perhaps remember, where many buildings were sandwiched. Many buildings collapsed. His didn't. Not only did his not collapse, there was very little damage. Maybe a few windows were broken. As a result of the tremendous amount of damage in downtown Mexico City, the government was looking for office space. And guess where they found it? By him. He got a better deal now than he would have had before. B'schut what? What was the schut? Shabbat. You do not lose because of Shabbat. On the contrary, whoever is stubborn, persistent, he will be blessed. And he will see the blessing. Another 2 stories. In Israel, in the very, very beginning, when the land was absorbing the many immigrants and new cities were being built, there were certain individuals who were wealthy and who took the initiative to build homes. The big company in Israel was Solel Boneh. Still, I think it's still working. There was this individual who ordered a tremendous amount of cement. Cement is expensive. They didn't have it in Israel, so it had to be imported. And with this cement, he was planning to build 20 homes, this new location. Friday after arranging all the barrels of cement close to where they were going to build, they all left home. Home was 20 miles away or more. After they left, it's already late afternoon, they realized that it's going to be a big downpour, and they forgot to cover the cement. And you know what that happens when the rain comes to the cement? Forget it. This was a tremendous amount of money, tremendous big investment. If he were to lose that, he would be almost ruined. So his workers said, let's go back and cover the cement. He says, I'm looking at my clock now and I realize that it's too close to Shabbat. If you go, you will be mechalel Shabbat, you will be desecrating the Shabbat, and I don't want to. No matter how much money I lose, I don't want you to be mechalel Shabbat. What can we do? Shabbat, he went to the Bet HaKnesset, he didn't even think about it, he was happy, he sang, and his workers were more nervous than he was. As soon as he made up the law, of course, he was very nervous. He ran himself. And what does he see? His barrels are all covered. The cement is all protected, even though there was a tremendous rain, and he thought everything was ruined. What happened? The other company, Solel Bonet, they sent people to cover the cement. By mistake, they covered his cement too. So he was protected, Baruch Hashem. You trust in Hashem, no problem. Third story. Some of you may have read the book All for the Boss. It's a very good book, I recommend it. Rabbi Herman is the star of the book, big tzaddik. He and his wife had made aliyah, I believe, that they had arrived in Israel mamash the day World War II broke out. And because of a change in the plan of the boat, because the captain of the boat was concerned about mines, the route to Israel was a little bit longer, and instead of arriving on a Wednesday, they arrived Friday. Because they arrived Friday, they had a problem. It was getting close to Shabbat, and they were told that they need to remove everything off the boat because the boat has to leave. How are we going to remove everything? We don't have enough time. They had all their belongings. They had 20 cases of clothing and other furniture. Aliyah, is a tremendous. They have people take entire containers, and they said it's no way possible. And Rabbi Herman says to his wife, "I'm going to grab the Sefer Torah that I have. I'm going to grab my talit and tefillin. You grab your personal bag, and that's it." And the captain tells him, "Listen, if you don't take your stuff, we're not responsible. There are Arabs around here. When you come back, Motzei Shabbat, there's nothing going to be left here. Forget it." He said, "I'm sorry. I need to leave. Just sign my passports that I'm released, and that's it." Okay, that means you're releasing us of any responsibilities. We're not obligated here. And everything was left there at the port. And he went home, kept Shabbat, did not worry about it. But obviously after Shabbat he began to be worried. And after Shabbat they went, him and his wife and another friend, to pick up anything that would be still there. Perhaps a few items were left. And what did they find? They find an English officer who was very upset. He says, "Are you Rabbi Herman?" He says, "Yes. They made me in charge of all of your belongings here. And I'm very, very tired already. Can you please get this out of the way as quickly as you can?" Somehow, min hashamayim, somebody decided to hire this officer to take care of this man's belongings. Just comes to show you that if you trust in Hashem, if you keep Shabbat, you do not lose, you only gain. In keeping Shabbat, there's also a lot of segulot. The rabbis tell us Shabbat is a tremendous source of protection. As the rabbis tell us, Kol ha-mekayem shalosh seudot b'Shabbat, whoever keeps Shabbat, especially the 3 meals in Shabbat, nitzol mechevlei Mashiach medina shel Gehenom u'milchemet Gog u'Magog. He will be spared from the judgment of Gehenom, from the tribulations of Mashiach's time, and from the most difficult war of all, the war of Gog and Magog. It also says that whoever respects, whoever honors the Shabbat properly, meruchaku min ha'avera, he he stays far away, removed from sin. The Shabbat protects him. And notnim lo kol mishalot libo. If he prays and asks, he has a tremendous zechut, that because of that zechut, they will answer his prayers. In other words, Shabbat is not only a source of blessing, it's a tremendous source of protection, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu listens to his prayers. What I'd like to do in the last few minutes that we have is talk a little bit about the onig and the kavod of Shabbat. What we've done till now is talk about the importance of Shabbat and what Shabbat really is, and how it is a source of blessing. But how are we supposed to really give proper kavod to the Shabbat? Many of you have heard the term Zachor v'Shamor. Zachor v'Shamor means to remember Shabbat. How do we remember Shabbat? By making kiddush, by the women lighting candles. We remember that this is Shabbat. We sanctify the day. Shamor means that we are careful from not doing any melachot, from not doing anything that goes against the spirit of Shabbat. But there's also something called Oneg Shabbat and Kavod of Shabbat. Oneg Shabbat means making Shabbat a special day, a special meal. Kavod of Shabbat means that you put on a fresh shirt, you change your clothes, you have special clothing just for Shabbat. You change your shoes, you change your belt, you change your kippah, you change your tzitzit, everything l'chvod Shabbat. You're showing kavod for the Shabbat. Kavod for the Shabbat is also by taking a shower. Some even go to the mikveh, l'chvod Shabbat. Kavod of the Shabbat is also me'asot derachecha u'mitzor chetzecha v'daber davar. In other words, from not talking on Shabbat about things that you would talk about during the day, during the week. Not about business, not about anything that has nothing to do with Shabbat. That your walk should be different on Shabbat. That your conduct should be different. Just your entire behavior, everything that you talk about, should not have anything to do with what you do or say during the middle of the week. All of that is part of the kavod of the Shabbat. Another example of kavod of the Shabbat is by receiving Shabbat a little earlier and exiting the Shabbat a little later. Not waiting for the first minute that Shabbat is over to rush out and go to grab some pizza or something. Look forward to greeting the Shabbat. When you look forward to greeting a friend, you stand outside, right, and see when he's coming. You're anticipating him, right? You don't. If you made up at 7, you're there at 10 to 7. That shows kavod for the Shabbat. Shabbat is over at 7. You don't say, okay, at 7 exactly, I will say Arvit and I will go and turn on the TV, Khalila. No, I will wait till 7:15. I'm not in a rush. All of that shows kavod for the Shabbat. And last but not least, many people throughout the week or throughout their lives lack what's called Yeshuv Da'at. Yeshuv Da'at, I don't know how to translate that in English, but loosely translated means they're not completely calm. They lack Yeshuv Da'at. No. It's a certain tranquility, relaxation. They lack this because they're always concerned about different things, whether it's about their business, whether it's about their kids, whether it's about their illness. They don't have Yeshuv Da'at. They're not calm. Shabbat, we need to remember, was given to us as an opportunity not only to focus on the more spiritual, but also, in a way, it offers us 24 hours or so of Yeshuv Da'at. Because we are basically told to forget about all these problems, to not to be depressed, to not to be thinking about all these problems. It's an opportunity to sit with the whole family, something which you may not have done a whole week. It's an opportunity to make up with your wife, if you've been fighting with her a whole week. It's an opportunity to gain so much, because this is a very different kind of a day. And because this is such a great opportunity, guess what happens on Friday afternoon? Has-Satan menaseh lekalkel. The Satan will try to ruin this day for you. And all the biggest fights you will have on Friday. The Satan does not want you to have a good Shabbat. He doesn't want you to have an easy time. And you will see it all the time. On Fridays, the biggest fights, the biggest disagreements, on nothing, shtuyot. So you have to be very careful with that. And look out for that. And remember, if your wife is unhappy, it's the Satan working through her. It's Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, he's also working through her. But especially on Friday, if she's upset at something that is not reasonable, we're talking about, obviously. Sometimes she's right, it could be something that needs to be taken care of. But many times it's nothing, and you're going to get upset. And what's going to happen? There's going to be fights at the table too. Chaval, where's the Shabbat? In order to preserve the sanctity of the Shabbat, it's important, lo lichos, not to get angry. It will be nice to sing, to say divrei Torah. Shabbat should be a time for learning. If you do not have time a whole week, that is a time to learn for yourself or with your children. All of that contributes to the Avirah, to the beautiful Avirah of Shabbat, to the beautiful ambience of Shabbat. When one does all of this, when one observes Shabbat properly, I assure you that he will be looking forward, yellow gaguim, he will really be looking forward for the next Shabbat.